In January 1475, Hadım Suleiman Pasha led somewhere between 40 and 100,000 Ottoman soldiers into Moldavia. Veterans of Constantinople, hardened by decades of conquest, commanded by a man who had watched the walls of the greatest city in Christendom crumble. Against them stood Stephen III with perhaps 12,000 men and a country he had already begun to destroy with his own hands. The grain was burning, the wells were poisoned, the livestock had vanished into the northern hills. Stephen was not defending Moldavia, he was consuming it deliberately, methodically, before the Ottomans could. And on the 4th of January, in a frozen river valley near Vaslui, in fog so thick that Suleiman's commanders could not read their own formations, that calculated act of self-destruction became the single greatest military defeat the Ottoman Empire had suffered in a generation. The Pope called it a victory for all of Christendom. Stephen called it something else entirely, because he already knew what no chronicle would bother to record, that the army marching home through the snow was not the last one coming. And while you are down there, I would love to know, was Stephen's scorched earth strategy an act of military genius or a war crime committed against his own people in everything but name? But before our journey begins, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a simple and wonderful way to support the channel, and it means a great deal to me. I'm also always curious to know where in the world and at what time you're joining me tonight. The grain goes first. It always goes first. Before the wells are poisoned, before the livestock are driven north into the hills, before the roads become traps and the river crossings become ambushes waiting for a season, the grain goes first. A Moldavian granary in January is not simply a building. It is the distance between a family and the ground. It is the calculation that carries a village from one harvest to the next, the margin that separates a hard winter from an unsurvivable one. And, in the last weeks of 1474, on the orders of Stephen III, Voivode of Moldavia, they are burning all of it. Watch the fire for a moment. Do not look away too quickly toward strategy, toward the brilliant geometry of what is being prepared. Stay here, in the orange light, in the smell of scorched grain and split timber, and watch the men who lit this fire stand at a distance with their torches still in hand. They are not celebrating. They are not even speaking. They are watching months of harvest, months of planting and tending and cutting and carrying and storing, the accumulated labor of women and men and children who rose before dawn and worked until the light failed. They are watching all of it become smoke. The granary collapses inward on itself, the way burning structures do, the walls folding toward the center as though the building is trying to contain the catastrophe inside itself. It cannot. The fire does not negotiate. It takes everything. Somewhere in the tree line, at the edge of the cleared land where the snow has settled into the furrows of the harvested field, the families who planted that grain are watching too. They stand in the dark with what they could carry. A child is crying and has been told quietly, firmly to stop. Because sound carries, and the reasons for silence are not explained to children in the middle of the night, only insisted upon. The adults do not cry. They watch their winter burn, and they say nothing, because there is nothing to say, and because the men standing at the edge of the field with their torches are their own men, their voivode soldiers, and the order that put the torch to the grain came from a man who they have been told, who they believe even now is trying to save them. This is where we begin. Not with Stephen's brilliance, not with the strategic overview that will, in time, reveal the extraordinary mind at work inside this act of destruction. We begin here with the fire, because the fire is the truth of the man before the legend of him has had a chance to form. And the fire demands to be held in the mind, in its full moral weight, before anything else is added to it. Stephen III understands his country the way a physician understands a patient in crisis, not with sentiment but with precision. Moldavia in the early 1470s is not a great power. It is not even, by the reckoning of the great powers that surround it, a meaningful obstacle. It is a corridor, a strip of forested hills and river valleys between the Carpathians and the Black Sea steppe, through which the ambitions of larger civilizations pass like weather. To the south, the Ottoman Empire has already consumed Constantinople, Bulgaria, and most of the Balkans. Its Sultan, Mehmed II, the man who brought the walls of the Eastern Roman world down with artillery and will, has remade the known world in the span of a generation. To the west, Hungary watches Moldavia with the careful, non-committal interest of a neighbor who might help or might not, depending on the arithmetic of the moment. To the north, Poland offers alliance in theory and almost nothing in practice. Moldavia's people are Orthodox Christians who farm and trade amber and cattle and pray that whatever storm is passing through their region passes quickly. Their voivode does not pray for storms to pass. He studies them. He prepares the conditions under which they will cost more than they are worth. For years, Stephen has been building toward a confrontation he knows is inevitable. He has refused Ottoman tribute, a refusal that is not defiance for its own sake, but a calculated statement of a man who understands that tribute, once paid, becomes the floor of future demands. He has raided Ottoman-aligned Wallachia, not because he imagines he can conquer it, but because he cannot allow a compliant neighbor on his southern border to become a staging ground for his own destruction. He has maintained diplomatic contact with Hungary and Poland as though he were an equal player in the region's politics, and this, perhaps more than anything, is what Mehmed finds intolerable. Not the raids, not the tribute, the presumption. In 1474, Mehmed II dispatches Hadım Suleiman Pasha, the governor of Rumelia, a veteran of Constantinople's fall, with a force that contemporaries estimate between 60 and 100,000 men. The message this army carries is not, in Mehmed's framing, a military one. It is administrative. This is not a war. It is a correction. Suleiman Pasha crosses the Danube in the winter of 1474 and advances north into Moldavia, accompanied by Basarab Laioti and his Wallachian forces, and by Serbian vassals conscripted into Ottoman service. The army is enormous. It is confident. It is accustomed to the open plains warfare of Anatolia and the Balkans, where numerical superiority and artillery can be brought to bear on an enemy that has no choice but to stand and be broken. It expects Moldavia to stand. Every army that has ever entered this corridor has expected the people in it to stand. Stephen does not stand. He retreats, and as he retreats, he burns. The scorched earth order does not come without objection. Among the assembled commanders, in the days before the granaries begin to fall, a Moldavian boyar steps forward and says what every man present is thinking. History has not preserved his name. The chronicles that celebrate this campaign have no interest in the men who hesitated, who asked the question that strategy requires you not to ask too loudly or too long. But he is there, this unnamed man, and he speaks. He knows the families in the villages along the army's planned retreat. He knows them by name. He understands, with a specificity that no strategic calculation can fully absorb, that a Moldavian winter does not negotiate, that the families who will watch their grain burn tonight will spend the months that follow in the forest, in the cold, eating what they can find, and that some of them will not survive to see the spring that Stephen is trying to preserve. He is not a coward. He is not a fool. He is a man watching his voivode make a calculation in which the people he has sworn to protect appear as an acceptable variable, and he cannot let that pass without saying so. His objection lands in the silence of the assembled men like a stone into still water. It is a genuine moral challenge. It does not ask Stephen to abandon his strategy. It asks him to look directly at what his strategy costs, to see, without the softening distance of abstraction, the faces of the people who will pay for the victory he is preparing. He is asking his voivode to carry the weight of this decision with full knowledge of what it means, and not to allow the clean language of military necessity to obscure the human arithmetic underneath it. Stephen listens to every word, then he burns the grain anyway. This is the detail that must not be rushed past. It would be easier, it would be more comfortable, if Stephen had dismissed the objection, if he had silenced the boyar with the impatience of a man who cannot afford to feel what he knows is true. But he does not dismiss it. He hears it. He weighs it. He looks at it fully, the way a man looks at something he wishes he could look away from, and then he gives the order. The torches go to the granaries. The grain becomes smoke, and the boyar, who has said his piece and been heard and overruled, stands at the edge of the firelight and turns his face toward the tree line, toward the place where the families are hidden in the dark, watching what is happening to everything they stored against the cold. This is not the story of a man who did not understand the cost of his decisions. This is the story of a man who understood it completely and decided anyway. And that is a harder thing to hold in the mind than simple ruthlessness, because ruthlessness at least offers the comfort of a villain. What Stephen offers instead is something far more unsettling, the image of a genuinely serious man in an impossible situation, choosing the least terrible option available to him. Not the right option, because there is no right option, only the terrible and the more terrible, and carrying the full knowledge of what he has chosen without flinching and without pretending that the arithmetic comes out clean. The fire burns through the night. The smoke rises into a January sky that is indifferent to what is happening beneath it. To the west, the silence is absolute. No crusade is assembling. No Christian monarch is riding to the aid of the small Orthodox principality on the eastern edge of Europe that has just torched its own winter stores in the hope of making itself indigestible to the largest army on the continent. The Pope is in Rome. Hungary is calculating. Poland is, as it will remain, somewhere between sympathy and inaction. The cold is the only thing that comes from the west tonight, and the cold is not an ally. It falls equally on the soldiers and the families in the trees and the embers of the granary, and it does not care whose side it is on. The unnamed boyar stands at the edge of the field, and he does not look at the fire anymore. He looks at the tree line. He cannot see the families from where he stands. The darkness is too complete, the tree line too distant, the smoke from the burning too thick in the air between him and the place where the people are hidden. But he looks anyway, the way a man looks towards something he knows is there, even when he cannot see it. He is not calculating. He is not strategizing. He is simply standing in the gap between what his voivode has decided and what that decision means to the people on the other side of the field, and holding both things at once, the way conscience requires you to hold them, without resolution, without the relief of a verdict that makes one side rig and the other wrong. The question that will drive everything that follows is already in the air above the ashes. When a man burns his own country to save it, who exactly has been saved? When the victory comes, and the victory will come, extraordinary and hard-won and celebrated across the Christian world, whose names will be in the chronicles, and whose names will be absent because the chronicles are written by the men who count armies, not the men and women who spent the winter of 1474 in the forest, watching their grain burn, waiting to be saved by a man who had just decided how much of their world he was willing to destroy. The fire settles into embers, the cold comes down, the smoke thins and rises and disappears into a sky that offers nothing back. Somewhere in the dark, a small country is learning what it will cost to survive. The map does not lie, it cannot afford to. Spread flat on a table, weighted at its corners against the wind that finds every room in every fortress in every season, the map of Moldavia in the early 1470s tells its story not in what it shows, but in what surrounds it. The principality is narrow. It is a country that seems to have been drawn by someone who ran out of room. a strip of forested hills and river valleys pressed between forces that do not acknowledge its right to exist as anything other than a passage. To the south, the Ottoman Empire. To the west, Hungary. To the north, Poland. Moldavia sits between them, the way a man sits between two arguments. He did not start, knowing that sooner or later someone will ask him to choose. Look south first. The eye must go south because that is where the momentum begins. Constantinople falls in 1453, and the fall is not merely the fall of a city. It is the fall of a world, a civilizational rupture that sends tremors through every court and monastery and market from the Adriatic to the Carpathians. The walls that have held for 1,000 years come down in 53 days. Mehmed II rides through the Hagia Sophia and stands beneath its dome, and what he feels is not savagery, it is completion. He is a man of genuine culture, a reader of Greek philosophy and Persian poetry, a ruler who understands that empire is not simply the accumulation of territory, but the reorganization of everything within it into a new and coherent order. This is what makes him dangerous in a way that a merely brutal conqueror would not be. Brutality can be outlasted. Coherence cannot. From Constantinople, the Ottoman advance traces northward like water finding the lowest ground. Bulgaria is absorbed. Serbia becomes a vassal, then a province. Wallachia, just south of Moldavia across the Danube, submits and pays tribute and provides soldiers who will one day be pointed northward at their own neighbors. The Ottoman Empire in 1474 is not a storm. Storms are disorganized, temporary, and indifferent to what they strike. The Ottoman Empire is administration. It is roads and census records and tax collectors, and the patient replacement of one civilization's organizing principles with another's. The territories it absorbs do not simply suffer, they are reorganized. This distinction matters enormously for understanding what Stephen faces, because he is not fighting evil. He is fighting inevitability, which is a harder thing to name and a harder thing to resist, because inevitability does not negotiate and does not tire and does not feel the cold. Stephen III becomes voivode of Moldavia in 1457, and the manner of his arrival tells you everything about the world he inhabits. He does not inherit the throne. He takes it, with Hungarian military support and the kind of ruthlessness that the Moldavian political environment both produces and requires. The principality he assumes control of is not a stable entity awaiting a capable ruler. It is a prize that powerful neighbors have been manipulating for decades, installing and removing voivodes with the casual efficiency of men who understand that a compliant Moldavia is more useful than a strong one. Stephen understands this immediately. He has grown up watching it. And the lesson he draws is not that he should seek a powerful patron who will protect him. The lesson he draws is that dependence is a form of dissolution. That a Moldavia which survives only because Hungary or Poland finds it convenient to allow its survival is a Moldavia that has already, in the most important sense, ceased to exist. So he builds. Not armies first, though armies come. He builds relationships, carefully, with the cold precision of a man who does not confuse warmth for reliability. He maintains contact with Hungary and Poland, offering just enough cooperation to keep both interested without committing to either. He watches his own boyars with the same attention he pays to foreign courts, understanding that internal conspiracy is not a separate problem from external threat, but the same problem wearing a different face. Several boyars who test this understanding do not survive the test. Stephen is not cruel for pleasure. He is precise. There is a difference, and it matters to him, and it is not certain it matters to the men he orders killed. But it is the land itself that becomes his true obsession. This is the habit that his contemporaries notice and do not entirely understand. The way Stephen studies maps, not as a courtly exercise or a military formality, but with the concentration of a man who believes the answers to questions he has not yet been asked are already written in the contours of the terrain. He walks river crossings in every season. He notes where the Balad River narrows, where fog collects in the valley bottoms on winter mornings, where a forest thickens enough to conceal cavalry, and where it opens enough to make cavalry irrelevant. He is building a kind of knowledge that has no immediate application, cataloging the geography of Moldavia the way a physician catalogs the vulnerabilities of a body, not because the patient is sick now, but because sickness is coming, and when it arrives, there will be no time to learn what he should have learned already. His contemporaries in the region provide him with examples, both instructive and cautionary. To the south, in Wallachia, a man named Vlad III has attempted a different solution to the same problem. Vlad is not a simple monster, whatever the legends accumulating around his name suggest. He is a man of genuine strategic intelligence who understands, as Stephen understands, that a small principality can only survive by making the cost of its conquest prohibitive. But Vlad's instrument is terror, a systematic, theatrical, deliberately public violence designed to paralyze his enemies through horror before they can organize against him. For a time, it works. Mehmed himself reportedly turns an army back from Wallachia after encountering the forest of impaled corpses. Vlad has arranged for his arrival. Terror, deployed with precision, can function as a military asset. But terror without institutional loyalty is a fire that consumes its architect. The boyars who might have sustained Vlad's rule against both internal and external pressure have been given no reason to choose his survival over his removal. When the moment comes, they do not choose it. Stephen watches this. He draws the correct lesson. The correct lesson is not that terror is wrong. Stephen is not a man who allows himself the luxury of thinking primarily in those terms, but that terror unaccompanied by the slower work of building genuine institutional relationships is a strategy with a ceiling. You can frighten men into compliance. You cannot frighten them into loyalty. And loyalty, in the end, is what a small country runs on. What Stephen builds instead is something colder and more durable. He builds an army that is not large, but is trained for the specific terrain it will fight in. He builds a network of fortifications that do not attempt to hold a line. No line can be held against Ottoman numbers, but that complicate and slow and exhaust any advance. He builds a system of scouts and informants that gives him information about Ottoman movements weeks before those movements become threats. And he builds, quietly, the conceptual framework for a kind of warfare that his enemies have not encountered from this direction before. A warfare that refuses engagement on the enemy's terms, that retreats and burns and strips the land of everything that sustains an army, and that waits, with the patience of a man who has studied every valley and river crossing in his principality, for the moment when the terrain itself becomes a weapon. The Hungarian relationship produces John Hunyadi's legacy, the memory of a Christian commander who held the Ottomans at Belgrade in 1456 and proved that the advance was not unstoppable. Stephen keeps this memory alive in himself as a strategic fact rather than an inspiration. Inspiration is unreliable. Strategic facts can be built upon. The Polish relationship is more complicated, offering alliance in the formal sense while delivering very little in the practical one. A pattern Stephen recognizes early and adjusts for, incorporating Polish unreliability into his calculations, the way an engineer incorporates the weakness of a mortar eel into the design of a structure. You do not curse the material. You account for it. By the early 1470s, Stephen has refused Ottoman tribute demands. He has raided Wallachian territory, harassing the Ottoman-aligned voivode there with a persistence designed not to defeat Wallachia but to signal to Mehmed that Moldavia under Stephen will be a constant, low-grade irritation. Expensive to tolerate and, Stephen is betting, more expensive to correct. He maintains diplomatic correspondence with Hungary and Poland and the papacy, not because he expects any of them to march to his defense, but because the correspondence itself communicates something important. This is a voivode who considers himself an actor in European politics rather than a subject. Mehmed II of Ottoman administration. The audacity of this is not lost on Mehmed. It is, in fact, precisely the point. The scouts arrive in the autumn of 1474. Stephen is in a hill fort, stone walls, a view south across forested ridges that fade into haze at the horizon, the kind of elevation that gives a man the illusion of perspective without the reality of safety. The reports are detailed, and they are not surprising. An Ottoman army is assembling. Hadım Suleiman Pasha, governor of Rumelia, veteran of the walls of Constantinople, is moving north with a force that the scouts estimate at numbers that should end the conversation before it begins. 60,000 men, perhaps more, perhaps considerably more, moving with the confidence of an institution that has not been seriously challenged in a generation. Stephen receives this news with the stillness of a man who has been expecting it. Not the stillness of calm, that would be the wrong word, too peaceful for what this moment contains. The stillness of recognition. The calculation he has been running for 17 years is about to be tested against reality, and reality is not a map weighted at its corners on a table. Reality is 60,000 men, and the winter coming down from the north, and the grain stores of his own people that he has already decided, in the cold arithmetic of survival, he will burn. He looks south. The forests hold their color for another few weeks, and then they will not. The Bollard Valley is down there somewhere, invisible in the haze, waiting. He has walked it in every season. He knows where the fog collects on winter mornings. He knows where the ground softens and where it holds. He knows what the valley does to an army that expects open ground and finds instead a corridor that compresses its numbers into irrelevance. He has been ready for this. He has been ready for years. The question that the autumn light does not answer, the question that no amount of preparation can answer in advance, is whether being ready is the same as being safe. Whether the map on the table, however carefully read, corresponds to the ground that 60,000 men are about to cross. Whether the plan that has taken 17 years to build will hold its shape when it meets the weight of the thing it was built to resist. It will not hold perfectly. Nothing does. But it will hold enough. And enough in Moldavia in the autumn of 1474 is all there is. Mehmed II does not lose sleep over Moldavia. This is not a boast. It is a fact about the nature of his position, and it is worth sitting with for a moment before the army moves. The man who took Constantinople at the age of 21, who reduced the last remnant of the Roman Empire to rubble and ash in the span of 53 days, who has since pushed his borders into Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, and the Crimea. This man does not experience Stephen's defiance as a threat. He experiences it as an irregularity, a clerical error in the ledger of empire. The tribute is owed. The tribute has not been paid. The client state of Wallachia has been raided. The voivode of a small forested principality is conducting diplomacy with the King of Hungary as though he were a sovereign power rather than a vassal who has not yet been corrected. These are not acts of war. They are administrative failures that have been allowed to accumulate past the point of quiet resolution. There is a particular kind of power that does not need to be angry in order to be lethal. Mehmed's empire in 1474 is that kind of power. It functions through credibility, and credibility is not divisible. You cannot permit one small voice at the edge of the map to speak out of turn without every other voice at every other edge hearing it. The Venetians are watching. The Hungarians are watching. The Poles, who offer Stephen alliance in theory and nothing in practice, are watching. Every client, every vassal, every tribute payer from the Danube to the Euphrates is watching to see whether the man who broke Constantinople's walls will allow a Moldavian voivode to simply decline his obligations. The answer, of course, is no. The answer has never been in doubt. What Mehmed sends north in the autumn of 1474 is not a declaration of war. It is a statement of arithmetic. The man he chooses to deliver it is Hadım Suleiman Pasha, governor of Rumelia, and the choice is itself a message. Suleiman Pasha is not a second-tier appointment. He is among the most accomplished military administrators in Ottoman service, a man whose career reads like a catalogue of successful subjugations. He was present at the fall of Constantinople. He has governed the empire's European heartland with the calm efficiency of someone who has never had cause to doubt the outcome of his instructions. He is, in every relevant sense, exactly the instrument this particular task requires. A correction does not need a genius, it needs a professional. Suleiman Pasha is a very serious professional. His force is enormous. The chronicles disagree on its precise size, and the honest answer is that no one living today can resolve that disagreement with certainty. The estimates range from 60,000 to 100,000 men, and the writer who resolves this number into false precision does a disservice to the genuine uncertainty of the historical record. What can be said without qualification is this: it is larger than anything Moldavia can field. It is larger than anything Moldavia has ever faced. It includes Janissary infantry, the elite corps of the Ottoman military, soldiers who have trained since childhood for exactly this kind of work. It includes Ottoman cavalry and artillery, and the full logistical apparatus of a state that has spent decades perfecting the science of moving armies across difficult terrain. And it includes, in its coalition, two other forces, whose presence tells a story that Suleiman Pasha is experienced enough to understand and wise enough not to say aloud. Basada Blaioti brings Wallachian troops. Serbian vassals march under Ottoman command. They are here because the Ottoman Empire has made the alternative to presence worse than presence itself, which is the mechanism by which empires conscript the unwilling. Their boots are on the road, their weapons are sharp. But loyalty is not simply a matter of equipment and position. Loyalty is a condition of the interior, and the interior of a Wallachian soldier marching toward his neighbor's country at the command of the power that holds his homeland as a client state is not the interior of a true believer. It is the interior of a man who has calculated his options and found them uniformly bad. Suleiman Pasha knows this. He is not naive about the nature of coalition warfare. He has commanded enough of it to understand that the Wallachian and Serbian contingents are performing loyalty rather than feeling it, and that performance will hold as long as the performance is easy. The moment it becomes expensive, the arithmetic of their allegiance will shift. He notes this privately. He does not remedy it because there is no remedy available to him that does not involve releasing forces he needs. The coalition's fracture is a structural fact, not a failure of management. He files it in the part of his mind where experienced commanders keep the things they cannot change, and he turns his attention to the things he can. The army is fed, the army is moving. The season, while late, is not yet impossible. Moldavia is small. The correction will be administered, and Suleiman Pasha will return to Rumelia before spring. The Danube crossing happens in the winter of 1474, and the army that crosses it is, in every visible respect, a machine of overwhelming force. It has crossed rivers before. It has moved through difficult terrain before. It has faced enemies who employed scorched earth tactics before, in the plains of Anatolia and the valleys of the Balkans, and in those places the tactic bought time but not survival. Suleiman Pasha has no particular reason to believe this geography will be different. He has every reason, drawn from 20 years of successful campaigning, to believe that what lies north of the Danube is a version of what has lain north of every other river he has crossed, a landscape that will resist briefly and then yield, because all landscapes ultimately yield to sufficient force. He is about to encounter something he has not encountered before, though he does not yet know it. The first villages the army reaches are empty, not abandoned in the way that villages are abandoned when an army approaches and the inhabitants flee to the nearest forest for a day or two, planning to return when the soldiers have passed. Empty in a different way, a deliberate way. The hearths are cold, not merely unattended. The food stores are gone, not merely locked away. And in some places, in the places where the grain was too heavy to move and too valuable to leave, there is ash, still warm in some cases. The army arrives in the aftermath of fire and finds nothing to requisition, nothing to forage, nothing to sustain 60,000 men moving through a forested river valley in January. The wells have been fouled. This detail is worth pausing on because it represents a particular kind of decision. Fouling a well is not a military tactic in the conventional sense. It does not destroy an army. It does not win a battle. What it does is accumulate. Each fouled well adds a small weight to the burden that Suleiman Pasha's army carries north, a small increment of thirst and uncertainty, and the growing awareness that the land through which they are moving is not neutral. It has opinions. It is cooperating with someone else. Stephen III has given these orders. The boyars have carried them out. And somewhere in the forests that press close against the road the army is following, the families who ate from those grain stores and drank from those wells are living through the consequences of a decision that was made for them rather than with them. History does not record their names. The chronicles that will eventually celebrate what is coming do not find room for the particular texture of a winter spent in the forest because your voivode burned your grain. They were not asked whether they consented to be the instrument of their own defense. They were told, and Stephen burned the grain anyway because the alternative he was weighing was not their comfort against their suffering. It was their suffering against the suffering of everyone. This is not a justification. It is a description of the kind of choice that leadership in impossible circumstances actually contains. There is no version of this decision that is clean. There is only the version where some people starve in the forest so that the army moving through their land finds nothing to eat, and the version where the army finds everything it needs and Moldavia ceases to exist as a political entity by spring. Stephen has chosen the first version. He has chosen it with the full knowledge of what it costs, and the knowledge does not make him hesitate. Suleiman Pasha rides forward into the emptiness and tries to name what he is feeling. He is not afraid. He is too experienced to be afraid of a principality that cannot field a quarter of his numbers. But he is a man who has spent his career reading situations, and this situation is reading strangely. The resistance is not where resistance usually is. There is no army on the road. There is no fortified line to break. There is only the absence of everything that should be here, and the absence has a quality to it that he cannot quite dismiss. It is too complete, too consistent. This is not the desperate improvisation of a people in flight. This is a plan, executed at scale by someone who knew months ago that this moment would come and spent those months preparing the ground for it. The ground has been prepared. He does not yet know the shape of what it has been prepared to become. The army moves deeper into the Vaslui region, following the Balad River Valley north, and the landscape narrows around it in ways that Suleiman Pasha's maps do not fully capture. Maps made at a distance from a landscape always fail in the same way. They record the names of places and the lines between them, but they do not record the feel of the terrain, the way the hills press inward, the way the river valley compresses the road until 60,000 men who were moving in S, almost like a broad front, are moving in something more like a column. The space that made their numbers an overwhelming advantage on the plains of the Balkans is being slowly, incrementally taken from them, not by any army, by the shape of the earth itself. Stephen is not in front of them. He is not behind them. He is somewhere in the trees, and the trees are everywhere, and the fog that has settled into the valley in these January days is the kind of fog that does not burn off by mid-morning. It stays. It blurs the distances. It makes the world smaller than it is, and in a world made smaller, 60,000 men and 40,000 men are not the same ratio they were on open ground. Suleiman Pasha does not know this yet in its full implication. He knows that the land is wrong. He knows that the coalition at his back includes men whose loyalty is a performance that is becoming more expensive by the day, fed badly, and moving through a countryside that offers nothing. He knows that somewhere ahead of him there is a man who has spent 17 years building the conditions for exactly this moment, and who is waiting with the patience of someone who chose the ground long before the army arrived on it. The correction has entered the country it came to correct. The country is not cooperating. And in the cold silence of the Barlad Valley, in the fog that presses down on 60,000 men who are hungry and cold and moving through a landscape that feels, in some way, none of them can articulate, as though it is already against them. In that silence, something that began as administration is becoming something else. Not yet a battle, not yet a catastrophe, but no longer quite the simple delivery of a foregone conclusion. The ledger that seemed so clear in Constantinople is beginning, line by line, to change its arithmetic. The army moves north. It moves because that is what armies do. It moves because Hadım Suleiman Pasha is a man of considerable experience and considerable confidence, and because the orders he carries from Constantinople are not suggestions. It moves because 100,000 men, once set in motion, possess a momentum that is almost geological, the kind of forward pressure that does not pause to interrogate the quality of the silence around it. It moves because stopping, in the military logic of the age, is a form of defeat, and Suleiman Pasha has not come this far, through this many campaigns, to be defeated by the absence of peasants and the smell of ash on the winter air. But the army is hungry. This is the first fact, and it is the most important one, and it is the fact that Stephen III of Moldavia has spent years learning how to make true. An army of 100,000 men requires, at minimum, 3,000 tons of grain and fodder every 10 days, simply to remain functional. The horses, the cavalry mounts, the artillery draft animals, the supply wagons require more than the men. The men can endure shortage, the horses cannot. When horses begin to weaken, artillery slows. When artillery slows, the tactical flexibility of the entire force contracts. When flexibility contracts, a commander's options narrow, and a commander whose options are narrowing is a commander who can be predicted, and a commander who can be predicted is already, in Stephen's calculus, half defeated. This is not philosophy, this is arithmetic. And Stephen has been doing this arithmetic for months. What Suleiman Pasha is experiencing as he moves through the Moldavian countryside in December of 1474 is not bad luck. It is architecture. Every village that stands empty when his scouts arrive, every well that tastes of something wrong, every field that yields nothing but stubble and the ghost of what was there. These are not accidents of geography or failures of intelligence. They are the deliberate construction of an environment. Stephen has built a desert and placed it with surgical precision in the path of the largest army his region has seen in a generation. The desert has no walls, it has no gates. It is simply the land itself, stripped of everything that makes land useful to an army, and it is doing its work with the patient indifference of weather. The unnamed boyar rides through it. He has not slept well since the burning orders came down. He will not sleep well again for some time. He rides not at the head of anything, not in command of anything, but through the aftermath, through the villages that were, until recently, his villages, the communities that fall within the portion of Moldavia for which he bears some measure of feudal responsibility. He knows these places by name. He knows the families who lived in them. He knows which granaries held the harvest of which fields, and he knows, with a specificity that no military chronicle will ever record, exactly what it means that those granaries are now black timbers and cold ash. He does not weep. He is past weeping. What he does, as he rides through the particular silence of a place that has been emptied on command, is bear witness. He catalogues a stone threshold that leads to nothing, a well cover, intact, beside a well that is no longer safe to drink, the small wooden cross above a doorframe that someone did not have time to take, or perhaps chose to leave, as though the house itself might need blessing in whatever comes next. The families are in the forest. They moved into the tree line in the first days of December with what they could carry. Children, the oldest and most portable icons, the livestock that could be moved quietly enough to avoid Ottoman foragers. They are surviving. That is the word Stephen uses when he speaks of them at all. They are surviving. The boyar understands, with a clarity he finds neither comforting nor useful, that Stephen is correct. He understood it the moment Stephen made the argument, in that tent, with that voice that does not rise when it makes its most terrible points. He understood the mathematics then, and he understands them now, and understanding them does not make the stone threshold lead anywhere. The choice was between the destruction of some and the destruction of all, and Stephen made it without hesitation. And the boyar, who argued and lost, now rides through the consequence of the correct decision and tries to hold both things at once, the correctness and the cost, without letting one cancel the other out. This is, perhaps, what it means to serve a great leader in an impossible time. Not to be wrong, not even to lose the argument, but to carry the ledger that victory will not carry for itself. Suleiman Pasha does not know about the boyar. He does not know about the argument in the tent. What he knows is that his foraging parties are returning with less each day, and that the land through which he is moving has a quality he struggles to name. Not hostile in any visible way, not defended in any conventional sense, but somehow already used against him. He is an experienced man. He took part in the campaign that ended Constantinople. He has moved armies through difficult terrain on multiple continents. He knows the difference between a countryside that is simply poor and a countryside that has been deliberately impoverished, and what he is moving through is the latter. Someone has been here before him. Someone has thought about his army's requirements and has addressed those requirements with a kind of cold thoroughness that he finds, if he is honest with himself, more unsettling than open resistance would be. Open resistance he knows how to answer. He has artillery for open resistance. He has cavalry for open resistance. He has numerical superiority so overwhelming that open resistance, in any conventional form, would simply be the prelude to a massacre. But this patient erasure of everything that sustains an army, this requires a different answer, and he is not certain he has one. His scouts report that the Moldavian forces are ahead of him, always ahead of him, never close enough to engage, never far enough to dismiss. They move through the forests along his flanks like something seen in peripheral vision, present when he does not look directly at them, gone when he does. They are not harassing him in any meaningful tactical sense. They are watching him. They are, he begins to understand, learning something from watching him, though he cannot yet determine what. The terrain is changing. This is the second fact, and it works upon Suleiman Pasha's army the way the first fact, the hunger, works upon it, slowly, cumulatively, in ways that do not announce themselves as decisive until they already are. The open plains of Wallachia, where his army moved with the confidence of a force that knows its own power, have given way to something more compressed. The hills are closer together here. The valleys are narrower. The roads, such as they are, in a principality that has never invested heavily in roads, because roads, as Stephen understands, are more useful to invaders than to defenders. The roads channel the army into columns that cannot deploy laterally without pushing through forest and pushing through est with an army of this size is not a tactical maneuver, but a catastrophe of logistics. The artillery, which is the Ottoman army's greatest advantage and Suleiman Pasha's greatest source of confidence, requires flat ground and space. It requires the ability to position and reposition, to find angles of fire, to bring its weight to bear across distances that make resistance futile. In the open plains of the Balkans, artillery is the argument that ends arguments. Here, in these narrowing valleys, it is becoming something heavier than it was. Not a weapon, but a burden, a weight that slows the column and demands attention and offers, in return, less and less of the decisive advantage it promises. Suleiman Pasha does not abandon his confidence. He is too experienced for that, and his confidence is not unfounded. He still commands an enormous force, still has the firepower and the manpower to crush any conventional resistance Moldavia can offer. But the confidence is no longer unexamined. It has begun to carry a question inside it, a question he does not yet know how to ask precisely, about the nature of the country he is moving through and the nature of the man who is retreating through it just ahead of him. Stephen has been in this valley before. He has been in it many times, in many seasons, with a surveyor's eye and a tactician's patience. He has walked the Balkans River Valley in summer, when the trees are full and the sightlines compressed to almost nothing. He has ridden through it in autumn, measuring distances, calculating angles, noting the way the valley's mouth, narrow, almost imperceptibly so from the south, where an approaching army sees only the gentle invitation of a river corridor, opens onto a bowl of terrain that is, in fact, a series of overlapping fields of fire for anyone positioned on its wooded ridges. He has been here in January, and he knows what January does to this valley. He knows how the fog collects in the low ground along the river, how it sits there in the early morning hours with a density that reduces visibility to almost nothing, how it does not lift quickly, how a force moving through it cannot see the ridges above it and cannot see the flanks pressing in on either side. He knows this the way a carpenter knows a piece of wood, not abstractly, not from maps, but from the physical memory of having been inside it, having run his hands along its grain. This knowledge, which began accumulating years before anyone in Constantinople was thinking about Moldavia's insubordination, is the inheritance of Stephen's obsessive habit of learning his own country as a weapon. Every road he has traveled, every river crossing he has measured, every valley he has walked in, unfavorable weather has been a deposit into an account he is now, in December of 1474, preparing to spend. The Balkans Valley is where he has chosen to spend it. He does not announce this. The valley is simply where the retreat leads, where the terrain logic of his withdrawal has always been pointing, where the narrowing of the land and the channeling of the Ottoman advance and the particular geometry of the ridgelines above the river converge into something that is not yet a battle B, but is already, in every meaningful sense, a trap. The trap has no walls that Suleiman Pasha can see. It has no gates he can close behind him. It has only the gradually tightening logic of the terrain, the hunger working on his men and horses, the cold that settles into the Moldavian winter with a thoroughness that the army from the warmer south is not entirely prepared for, and the fog, the January fog of the Balkans lowlands, waiting, eat of him like a held breath. The boyar rides back to Stephen's camp as the light fails on a December afternoon. He carries nothing from the burned villages. There is nothing to carry. He reports what he has seen with the economy of a man who has learned that description is a form of witness, and that witness, even when it changes nothing, is the only honest response to what cannot be changed. Stephen listens. Stephen nods. Stephen turns back to the maps he has been studying, the maps that show the Balkans Valley in the kind of detail that only comes from personal knowledge, from the accumulated memory of a man who has spent years learning the precise shape of the place where he intends to make his stand. Outside the tent, the army of Hadım Suleiman Pasha continues its advance. It is cold, it is hungry. Its horses are beginning to weaken in ways that the cavalry commanders are noting with increasing concern. The foraging parties return with less each day. The villages are empty. The wells are compromised. The terrain is narrowing around the column like something closing, though the sensation is so gradual, so devoid of any single dramatic moment, that it is difficult to point to any one day and say, here is where the trap began to close. It has always been closing. It began closing the moment Stephen gave the burning orders and the first granary went up in the dark. By late December of 1474, Suleiman Pasha's army is cold, hungry, and moving through a landscape that offers nothing. The men are still dangerous. 100,000 cold and hungry soldiers are still 100,000 soldiers. But the conditions Stephen has created are working on them like slow arithmetic, subtracting capability with every mile north. The Borlad River Valley waits ahead, its narrow mouth giving no indication of what it holds. Its January fog not yet descended, but coming as it always comes, as Stephen has always known it would come, as reliable as anything in a world where very little is reliable, and the only certainty is the Shah. P of the land and the patience of the man who has learned to use it. The trap is not yet sprung, it is simply getting tighter. January 10th, 1475. The fog comes in before dawn. It does not drift, it does not creep. It descends with the specific weight of cold air meeting river water. The Balad exhaling upward into a sky that has no interest in clarity this morning, and within an hour of its arrival, the valley is not a valley anymore. It is a room. It is a room with no ceiling and no visible walls and no exit that any man inside it can find without a guide who already knows where the walls are. Stephen knows where the walls are. He has always known where the walls are. He has walked this ground in summer and in autumn and has stood in this precise cold and studied the way the river bends and the way the hillsides compress the space between them and the way an army that enters from the south must funnel, must narrow, must surrender the one advantage it carries ever, where, due, where it goes, its size, simply by virtue of being here. The fog is not luck. It is the last ingredient in a recipe that has been years in preparation, and it arrives this morning with the punctuality of something that was always going to happen. Inside the Ottoman column, the morning is a different experience entirely. Hadım Suleiman Pasha commands what is, by any measure of the age, one of the finest military instruments ever assembled. His janissaries are not conscripts. They are professionals in the truest sense. Men who have known nothing but war since boyhood, who have stood in the breach at Constantinople and watched the walls of the ancient world come down, who have marched through the Balkans and across Anatolia and have learned that the Ottoman formation, disciplined, anchored by artillery on the flanks and infantry in the center, is as close to an irresistible force as the 15th century has managed to produce. They are not fools, they are not afraid. They are cold and hungry, and they have been moving through a landscape that has given them nothing. No grain, no livestock, no fodder, no warmth, for weeks. And this is an irritation, but it is not a crisis. Armies endure. This one has endured worse. What the janissaries cannot know, what no man inside that column can fully perceive in the fog and the narrow press of the valley, is that the army has already lost. It has lost not this morning, not in the last hour before dawn, but weeks ago, when it crossed into a landscape that Stephen had spent months rendering into a weapon. The hunger is not incidental. The cold is not incidental. The fog is not incidental. Every element of their misery has been arranged. They are inside a mechanism. The mechanism is closing. The Ottoman frontage, which on open ground might extend for miles and bring its full numerical weight to bear on any opposing line, has been compressed by the valley walls into something that functions, in practical terms, like a fraction of itself. 100,000 men, and the chronicles suggest something near this number, though the arithmetic of medieval armies is always approximate and always contested, occupy a space that allows perhaps 10,000 of them to fight at once. The rest are behind. The rest are irrelevant. The artillery, which is the empire's great equalizer, its technological edge over every enemy it faces, cannot find the stable, elevated ground it requires. The guns are there. They simply cannot be used. Stephen has not neutralized the Ottoman artillery through any feat of arms. He has neutralized it by choosing a place where the ground itself makes it useless. This is the economy of his genius. He does not fight what he cannot beat. He finds the conditions under which what he cannot beat becomes something he can. The attack comes in the last hour before the fog begins to thin. The Moldavian infantry moves first, pressing from the north, and the sound of it reaches the Ottoman center before anything is visible. Drums, horns, the specific human noise of men who have been waiting in cold silence for hours and are now moving with a release of motion after stillness. The Janissaries form. They are professionals. They do what professionals do, which is to organize quickly and meet the contact with discipline, and for a time, for long enough that the outcome is not obvious. They hold. The front of the column absorbs the pressure from the north and holds it. And this is the Janissaries being exactly what they are. The finest infantry in the world, fighting on ground that has been chosen against them, in weather that blinds them, after weeks of hunger and cold, and still holding. Then the flanks close. The Moldavian cavalry comes from the east and the west simultaneously, moving through the hillside forest that the Ottoman commanders have not been able to see clearly enough to screen, and the valley, which has already made the army small, makes it smaller still. The encirclement is not complete in an instant. It is complete in the way that a knot pulled tight is complete, gradually, and then all at once, and then there is no loosening it. The Ottoman formation, which has survived by being deep and anchored and supported on all sides, discovers that it is deep and anchored and supported on no side at all. It is surrounded on 3 sides by ground. It cannot retreat through, and an enemy it cannot see clearly enough to count. And then the Wallachians break. This is the moment. This is the stone through the ice. Stephen's intelligence. And his intelligence is the undersung instrument of this entire campaign, the network of men and information that has told him where the seams in the Ottoman force are located, has placed the Wallachian and Serbian vassal contingents precisely where their loyalty is thinnest, and their structural importance is greatest. Basarablayot's Wallachians are not Ottoman soldiers. They are men conscripted into Ottoman service. Men who serve because refusal has consequences. Men who are here because they had no better option, and who have, in the weeks of cold and hunger and the slow comprehension that this campaign is not going as it was meant to go, arrived at the calculation that another option may exist exist. When the Moldavian pressure comes and the flanks begin to fold, and the fog makes the size of the attacking force impossible to estimate, when all of this happens at once, the Wallachians do not fight. They run. They run through the Ottoman center. This is not a retreat. A retreat has shape. A retreat has direction. What happens when the Wallachian formation collapses inward through the Ottoman center is a different thing entirely. It is panic made physical. 10,000 men moving fast and without coordination through a space already compressed beyond its functional limit. And the effect on the Ottoman format. Ion is the effect of a stone through ice, exactly as it was designed to be. The Janissaries, who have held the front against Moldavian infantry, now have behind them a mass of fleeing men moving in the wrong direction, and what was a disciplined formation is now a problem of physics. Too many bodies, too little space, too many directions of threat, and no ground to move to. That is not already occupied by something dangerous. The discipline fractures, not immediately, not without resistance. The Janissaries fight because that is what they do, because training and pride and the specific stubbornness of professional soldiers does not evaporate in an instant, but it fractures. And once it fractures, the valley does the rest. The rout is absolute, and it is brutal, and there is no honest way to write about it that makes it anything other than what it is. Men who cannot retreat are killed. Men who attempt to cross the Balad in the cold and the press find the river an enemy as lethal as any Moldavian blade. The pursuit lasts through the day and into the following hours, the Moldavian cavalry moving through the valley and beyond it, and the Ottoman dead accumulate in numbers that the chronicles record with a specificity that suggests the recorders are themselves trying to comprehend what has happened. 30,000 dead is the figure most often cited. Some chronicles say more, Suleiman Pasha escapes. A fraction of the army he led into Moldavia escapes with him. The rest remain in the Balkans Valley, in the cold, in the snow, in the specific silence that follows the end of violence, when the violence has been total enough. Stephen stands in it. The fog lifts, and he stands in what it reveals, and the scale of the thing is visible now in the January light. The valley floor, the river, the white ground that is not entirely white anymore. And this is a victory. This is, by any measure that military history applies to such events, one of the great victories of the age. It is the largest single defeat the Ottoman Empire has suffered since Timur shattered Bayezid at Ankara in 1402, 73 years before this January morning. No Christian army has done this to the Ottomans in living memory. No Christian army has come close. Stephen is 38 years old. He has spent years building toward this morning. He has burned his own countryside. He has driven his own people into the winter forest. He has made decisions that no chronicle adequately describes, because the people most affected by those decisions leave no chronicles. He stands in the valley, and he knows what he has done, and he knows, with the same crystalline precision that has guided everything, what he must do next. He writes letters. The letter to Pope Sixtus IV is composed with the care of a man who understands that he is making an argument as much as reporting a fact. Stephen does not write as a voivode celebrating a local victory. He writes as the forward shield of Christendom, as the soldier who has stood in the breach that every Christian monarch was too distant, or too cautious, or too preoccupied to stand in himself. He tells the Pope that he has met the enemies of the faith in the field and has broken them. He tells him that 30,000 of the Sultan's soldiers lie in Moldavian snow. He tells him, and this is the sentence that every scholar who has read this letter returns to, that he has not done this for Moldavia alone. He has done this for all of Christendom, and Christendom now owes him a response. The letter to Matthias Corvinus of Hungary is more specific. Stephen and Corvinus have history, alliance and tension in roughly equal measure, and Stephen writes to him not as a suppliant, but as a partner making a claim. He has held the Eastern door. He asks Corvinus to help him hold it. He uses the word crusade. He uses it deliberately, because it is the word that carries the most weight in the diplomatic vocabulary of 1475. The word that can move money and men and papal authority if it is applied correctly. Stephen applies it correctly. He has earned the right to apply it. The letter to Casimir IV of Poland is perhaps the most careful of all, because Poland has been the most ambivalent ally, present in theory, absent in practice. And Stephen writes to him with the particular precision of a man addressing someone who has already let him down once and may be persuaded not to do it again. He recounts the battle. He recounts the numbers. He asks for soldiers, for money, for the formal recognition that what has happened in the Balkans Valley matters to Warsaw as much as it matters to Suseba. He sends these letters into the winter. He waits in the snow for answers. The triumph is absolute, and the isolation is absolute. And both of these things are true at the same time. And this is the condition that no military history of the battle fully captures. That the man who has just won the greatest Christian military victory of his generation is standing in the after. Mathavet, surrounded by the dead of both sides, waiting to hear whether the civilization he has just defended will notice. The Pope will send congratulations. Corvinus will send cautious interest. Casimir will send nothing of substance. No crusade will come. No army will march to stand beside the Moldavian forces before the next Ottoman response begins to take shape. Stephen knows this, or some part of him knows it, even as he writes. He has studied the behavior of allies as carefully as he has studied the behavior of terrain. He knows that Christian solidarity is a concept that functions best at a safe distance from the thing it is meant to defend. He writes anyway. He writes because the letters are not only appeals, they are documents. They are the record of what was asked and what was given. And Stephen is a man who understands that history is made not only by what happens, but by what is recorded. And he is recording with great care the gap between his victory and the world's response to it. The fog is gone now. The valley is clear. The January light falls without mercy on everything it finds, and what it finds is the arithmetic of a battle that changed the balance of a century. 30,000 dead, an empire briefly checked, a small country briefly saved, a man standing in the snow composing letters that will be answered wit. Silence and congratulations and cautious interest and nothing that resembles the crusade he has earned. He has won. He is alone in his winning. These two facts sit beside each other in the cold Moldavian January, and they will sit beside each other for the rest of his life. And they will sit beside each other in the long memory of a nation that will eventually make him into a saint and a symbol and a founding myth. And still, the silence of 1475 will be there underneath the celebration. The unanswered letters, the snow that covered the valley and covered the dead and covered the distance between what Stephen the Great gave Christendom and what Christendom gave him in return, which was nothing, which was almost nothing, which was the cold clarity of a man who has always understood that he is alone in this work, that the shape of the land is his only reliable ally, and that the fog, the weapon he collected, the instrument he waited years to use, has lifted now and will not return when he needs it next, and the next time will be worse, and he will burn again, and the people will suffer again, and he will make the same calculation again, because the alternative is not suffering. The alternative is ending. He folds the letters. He sends them out across the winter roads, toward Rome, toward Buda, toward Krakow, toward every court that might conceivably respond. And he begins, even now, even in this moment of supreme achievement, to think about what comes after. Because what comes after is already assembling itself far to the south, in the mind of a sultan who does not accept corrections to his corrections, and who has just been given, in the snow of the Balkans Valley, the largest correction of his reign. The letters travel by courier through the January cold, through the Carpathian passes and the frozen Danube crossings, through the administrative corridors of kingdoms that are warm. This is the first and most important fact about them. They arrive in warm rooms. The men who receive them are sitting beside fires, at desks covered with the ordinary paper of governance, and they break the seals of Stephen's dispatches with hands that have not been cold in weeks. The physical distance between the Balkans Valley and the courts of Europe is not merely geographic, it is thermal. And in that warmth, something about the urgency of what Stephen has written begins, almost imperceptibly, to cool. Pope Sixtus IV reads his copy in the Vatican, and his admiration is genuine. This must be said plainly, because the temptation is to make him a hypocrite, to retroactively assign cynicism to a man whose enthusiasm for the victory is documented and real. He calls Stephen the athlete of Christ. He means it. He is a man who has spent years watching the Ottoman tide move through the Balkans with the patient, inexorable quality of geological process, and the news from Moldavia is the first significant reversal he has witnessed in memory. His praise is not diplomatic formula. It is the praise of a man who has been genuinely surprised by grace. But Sixtus IV is also the head of an institution whose capacity for military action depends entirely on the cooperation of secular monarchs who have their own wars, their own borders, their own calculations. And in the spring of 1475, not one of those monarchs is prepared to march east. The Pope's admiration is a real thing. Its limits are structural, not moral. He is not a villain in this story. He is a man whose enthusiasm for the right thing cannot be converted, through any mechanism available to him, into the right thing actually happening. Matthias Corvinus of Hungary is a different and more complicated case. He is, by any measure, the most consequential monarch in Central Europe, a man of genuine military ability and genuine strategic intelligence, who understands the Ottoman threat as well as anyone alive in 1475. He is not ignorant of what Vaslui means. He is not indifferent to it. He receives Stephen's letter and he reads it with the focused attention of a commander evaluating a subordinate's field report, because that is, in some functional sense, how he has always understood his relationship to Moldavia. His diplomatic response is cautious and warm, and carefully non-committal, which is to say, it is a masterpiece of the form. He sends congratulations. He sends the implication of future cooperation. He sends nothing else. What he is managing in the winter and spring of 1475 is a web of competing obligations that would paralyze a lesser man and merely slow Matthias. His relationship with the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III is a running argument conducted in the language of dynastic politics, and it consumes attention and resources that cannot simultaneously be directed eastward. His ambitions in Bohemia, the crown he covets and has been maneuvering toward for years, are at a delicate stage that military adventurism on the Moldavian frontier would jeopardize in ways too complex to quickly enumerate. And beneath all of this, there is a cold strategic logic that the documentary must let breathe without endorsing. A Moldavia that survives because Hungary rode to its rescue is a Moldavia that owes its existence to Hungary. A Moldavia that survives on its own is a Moldavia that owes nothing. Matthias Corvinus is not a man who fails to notice the difference. The calculation is comprehensible. It is also the thing that leaves Stephen alone, and the documentary makes no apology for naming both of these facts in the same breath. Casimir IV of Poland is a briefer case, but not a lesser one. His alliance with Stephen has always had the quality of a document that looks more substantial than it is, the kind of treaty that is written in the language of mutual obligation and read, when the moment of obligation arrives, in the language of strategic inconvenience. His own nobility resists Eastern entanglements with the focused stubbornness of men who have their own borders to worry about, their own quarrels with their own neighbors, their own sense that the Moldavian frontier is someone else's problem. His resources are committed elsewhere. His response to Stephen's victory letter is, in the end, silence. Not hostile silence, not contemptuous silence, but the silence of a man who has received a dispatch that makes a claim on him and has decided, quietly and without drama, that the claim will not be honored. Stephen does not receive a refusal from Casimir. He receives nothing. In some ways, this is worse, and so the crusade does not come. The crusade that Stephen's letter implied, that the sacrifice of Moldavian grain and Moldavian lives, and the blood of 30,000 Ottoman soldiers in the snow had earned, had purchased, had made morally unavoidable, does not materialize. The warm rooms of Europe process the news from Vaslui and find it admirable, and find it, ultimately, someone else's problem. Stephen waits through February and into March, and the dispatches that return to him carry the specific texture of diplomatic non-response. The warm words that mean nothing, the cautious interest that commits to nothing, the congratulations that cost nothing to send and nothing to break. To understand what this silence means, it is necessary to go back, not far, but precisely, to the thing that made the silence possible, to the morning of January 10th, to the fog on the Bahlad Valley, to the moment when the Ottoman army began to discover what it had walked into, because the victory at Vaslui is not simply a tactical achievement. It is the product of decisions made weeks and months earlier, decisions whose consequences only become visible in the chaos of a collapsing battle line. And the most consequential of those decisions concerns men who were never fully committed to the army they were part of. The Wallachian troops under Basarab Laioti and the Serbian vassals conscripted into Ottoman service are not, in January 1475, an army in any meaningful sense. They are men under obligation, Men who march because the alternative to marching is worse, who carry weapons because they have been told to carry weapons, whose loyalty to the Ottoman cause is a performance sustained by the presence of Ottoman authority and the absence of any better option. Stephen has known this since before the campaign began. His intelligence, built through years of careful cultivation, through the networks of traders and priests and minor nobles who move between Moldavia and its neighbors, has told him where the loyalty of these troops ends. And in the weeks before Vaslui, he has placed them accordingly. This is the plant that becomes the pivot. In Chapter 3 of this story, when Suleiman Pasha's army crosses the Danube and the composition of the invading force becomes clear, the thin loyalty of the vassal troops is noted as a strategic fact, one element among many in Stephen's assessment of what he is facing. Now, in the fog of January 10th, that fact becomes the hinge on which the entire battle turns. The Moldavian attack comes from three sides simultaneously, and it comes in conditions that strip the Ottoman army of its most reliable advantages. The fog makes coordination impossible. The narrow valley makes numerical superiority irrelevant. You cannot bring 60,000 men to bear on a front that the terrain compresses to a fraction of that width. The Ottoman cavalry, which on open ground would be devastating, finds itself in a landscape that turns its mobility into confusion. And in the center of the Ottoman line, precisely where Stephen's intelligence predicted they would be most vulnerable, the Wallachian and Serbian vassal troops encounter the Moldavian assault and make a decision that is not really a decision at all. It is the revelation of something that was always Their commitment was conditional. The condition has changed. They break. They do not simply retreat. This is the crucial distinction. A retreat is an organized withdrawal that preserves unit cohesion and allows a force to regroup. What happens in the center of the Ottoman line on the morning of January 10th is not a retreat. It is a collapse, sudden, total, and propagating outward through the formations around it like a fracture moving through ice. The vassal troops run, and in running they move through the Ottoman center rather than away from it, because the geography of the valley leaves them no other direction, and their passage through their own army is catastrophic in ways that no enemy assault could replicate. They are not a force that has been defeated. They are a force that has become a weapon pointed the wrong way, and the Ottoman center comes apart around them with the specific quality of a structure that was always depending on something that was never really there. Suleiman Pasha sees what is happening and he cannot stop it. The fog means he cannot see the whole field. The noise of a collapsing battle line, the particular acoustic chaos of men who are no longer fighting but fleeing, who are no longer a formation but a crowd, makes command impossible. He is a veteran of the conquest of Constantinople. He has stood in the wreckage of walls that his army broke down. He knows the difference between a battle that is going badly and a battle that is over, and he makes the only correct decision available to him. He rides. He escapes. Perhaps 30,000 men do not. The number is almost impossible to hold in the mind as a number. 30,000 men. In a single morning, in a valley in Moldavia, in fog. The largest Ottoman defeat since Timur shattered Bayezid at Ankara in 1402. And Ankara was more than 70 years ago, which means that no one commanding an Ottoman army in 1475 has any living memory of a loss on this scale. The Ottoman Empire has been, for the entirety of its mature existence, a thing that wins. Vaslui is the thing that changes that sentence, at least for a morning, at least in one valley, at least until the Sultan decides what to do about it. And now the camera must move south, because what is happening in Constantinople in the weeks after Vaslui is as important as what is happening in Suseba or Rome or Buda. Mehmed II receives the news of Suleiman Pasha's defeat, and the quality of his response is not strategic. It is personal. This is a man who has spent his reign rewriting the limits of what an empire can do, who broke the walls of Constantinople with his own artillery, who extended Ottoman reach into territories that previous sultans considered permanently beyond grasp, who has built his identity and his legitimacy on the fact of continuous, overwhelming success. Vaslui is not a setback he can absorb administratively, cannot be filed as a regional commander's failure and corrected through a change of personnel. It is too large for that. It is too visible. The decision to lead the next campaign personally is made, and it is made quickly, and it is an imperial statement before it is a military one. When Mehmed II announces that he will march to Moldavia himself, he is not primarily communicating a tactical choice. He is communicating something about the nature of Ottoman power, that its humiliations are answered by the Sultan's presence, that the man who took Constantinople does not send subordinates to correct the record. The army he will bring in 1476 will be larger than the one Suleiman lost. It will be harder. It will carry the particular quality of forces that have something to prove, which is the most dangerous quality an army can have. Stephen in Suceava understands all of this. He has understood it since before the last Ottoman soldier fell in the Balkans Valley. And so spring comes to Moldavia in 1475, and Stephen works through it with the methodical focus of a man who expected the silence and prepared for it anyway. He rebuilds, he refortifies, he reestablishes the supply networks that the winter campaign consumed. He writes more letters, knowing they will produce the same warm words and the same absence of action, because writing them is part of the arithmetic. Every week of diplomatic engagement is a week of preparation, and Stephen does not waste weeks. He is not despairing. Despair would require surprise, and Stephen has not been surprised by anything in this sequence of events. He understood the arithmetic before the answer came back, and the answer has confirmed the arithmetic exactly. But there is something in his preparation now that was not there before, a quality that is difficult to name precisely, but that the historical record, in its silences and its small details, allows us to sense. He has burned his country once. He has watched his people spend a winter in the forests, cold and hungry, because the destruction of their grain was the price of their survival. He has made that calculation, and he has been proven right by the body count in the Balkans Valley. And he knows, with the same crystalline precision that has governed every decision of his reign, that he will have to make it again. The next time the grain stores burn, the peasants who watch them burn will know that the last time did not end the war, only postponed it. The next time Stephen explains why the destruction of some is necessary to prevent the destruction of all, the explanation will be harder to make, because the people receiving it will remember that they were told this before. This is not a story about a man who wins. It is a story about a man who wins and then must live with what winning costs, and what it does not buy, and what it requires him to do again. The crusade that did not come is not a betrayal. It is a fact. The Sultan who is already preparing his answer is not a villain. He is a force, like weather, like gravity, like the particular shape of history pressing down on a small country in a corridor between larger ones. Stephen the Great stands in the spring of 1475 with a victory that has changed everything and changed nothing, and he sets about spending the time it purchased with the focused, cold, particular loneliness of someone who has always known how this arithmetic works and who has never once been wrong. About the answer. The letters go out in the weeks after Vaslui, carried by riders moving fast through winter roads still frozen hard enough to hold a horse at speed. Stephen writes to Pope Sixtus IV first. He writes to Matthias Corvinus of Hungary. He writes to Casimir IV of Poland. He writes to the Venetian Senate, to the Doge, to the scattered courts of a Christendom that has been watching the Ottoman advance for a generation with the paralyzed fascination of men watching a fire cross a field towards someone else's house. The letters are extraordinary documents, not in their rhetoric, which is careful and measured, but in what they claim and in what the claiming costs a man of Stephen's particular pride. He does not merely report a victory, he frames it, he constructs an argument. He tells these courts that Moldavia has done what none of them were willing to do, that his army of 40,000 has broken a force of perhaps 100,000 on the frozen ground of the Baulad Valley, and that the shield he has raised for Christendom is a shield raised at Moldavian expense. With Moldavian blood in a country that cannot sustain another assault without help from the powers whose interests he has just defended at such cost. He is not begging, he is presenting an invoice. He is explaining, with the clarity of a man who understands exactly how leverage works, that the moment for a crusade is now, while the Ottoman army is still regrouping, while the shock of Vaslui still ripples through the courts of Istanbul, while the window, narrow, historical, unrepeatable, Rima, ends open. The silence that answers him is not immediate. That would almost be easier. Instead, there are congratulations. There are warm letters and diplomatic formulations and expressions of profound admiration. Pope Sixtus calls him the Athlete of Christ, a title that contains everything and promises nothing. Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, who has his own calculations to make and his own borders to protect, acknowledges the victory with the careful enthusiasm of a man who is genuinely impressed and genuinely unwilling to act on his impressions. Poland sends what Poland has always sent, a letter written in the language of alliance, signed with the ink of good intentions, backed by the full weight of nothing. The Venetian Senate deliberates. The deliberations produce more deliberations. Stephen reads these responses. He reads them with the face he has learned to wear in council, the face that gives nothing away, and he understands with the same crystalline precision that has governed every decision of his military career that the window is closing. He has bought time, he has not bought rescue. The difference between those two things is the difference between a man who survives and a man who thrives, and Stephen has never in his life had the luxury of confusing them. What the letters reveal, measured now against what answers them, is the precise geometry of his isolation. He is the most successful Christian military commander of his generation, and he is alone. He has inflicted on the Ottoman Empire its greatest defeat in 70 years, and the courts of Europe file it under impressive and move on to their own concerns. The gap between what he asked for and what he received is not a gap born of cruelty or even of cowardice in those distant courts. It is a gap born of the oldest arithmetic in statecraft, that every king protects his own kingdom first, and a kingdom that is not yours is a cause before it is a commitment. Stephen has always known this. Knowing it does not make the silence easier to sit with in the spring and summer of 1475, while his intelligence reports begin to carry the first rumors of what is being assembled to the south. Because Mehmed II does not accept corrections to his corrections. This is the fact that shapes everything that follows. The Ottoman Sultan, who broke Constantinople's walls, who reduced a civilization that had stood since the age of Augustus to rubble and silence, who has spent 30 years remaking the map of the known world according to his own imperial ambition. This man has just been told, by a voivode of a small, forested principality, that the correction he dispatched was insufficient. And so, in the summer of 1476, Mehmed comes himself. The difference between this army and the one that Vaslui destroyed is not merely numerical, though it is that too. Larger, resupplied, reorganized, carrying the lessons of the previous campaign's failure, like a wound that has been treated and hardened into scar tissue. The difference is the man at its head. Suleiman Pasha was a governor, a professional, a veteran, a man doing his job with the tools of his empire. Mehmed II is something else entirely. He is the conqueror. He is a man for whom defeat is not a tactical setback, but a personal insult. And personal insults have a way, in the psychology of great power, of transforming campaigns from corrections into erasures. He rides north through the summer heat with an army that contemporaries estimate between 150,000 men, and the message his presence carries to every watching court in Europe and every vassal state in the region is unambiguous. Ottoman power does not learn from defeat and recalibrate. It returns larger and ends the conversation. Stephen watches this approach with the eyes of a man who has already calculated the outcome and does not flinch from what the calculation shows. He cannot fight Mehmed on open ground. He cannot absorb this army at a choke point, the way he absorbed Suleiman Pasha's force at the Burlad Valley. The terrain advantage is real but not magical, and an army this size, commanded by this man, will not be drawn into the same trap twice. What he can do, what he has always been able to do, is deny. He can make Moldavia ungovernable. He can make the land itself the weapon, as he has made it before, and he can pay the price that weapon demands, as he has paid it before. The order to burn goes out again. There is no record of the boyar who confronted Stephen over the first burning in the autumn of 1474 saying anything this time. Perhaps he has made his peace with the logic. Perhaps he understands, after the winter his people spent in the forests and the victory that winter made possible, that Stephen's arithmetic is not cruelty dressed in strategy, but strategy that costs what it costs and saves what it saves. Or perhaps he simply has nothing left to say. The argument was made, the argument was heard, and the grain burned anyway, and Moldavia survived. What is there to add? The same logic, the same suffering, the same cold answer to the same impossible question. And this time, the families who spent the winter of 1474 in the forest are in the forest again. The grain stores they rebuilt through 18 months of desperate recovery. The stores that represent not just food, but proof that something can be reconstructed after deliberate destruction are burning again. The smoke rises over the same valleys. The same children watch it from the same tree lines. This is what victory costs when victory is not rescue. Stephen won at Vaslui, and the winning bought his people 1 year of rebuilding before the burning had to begin again. The harvest of 1475, planted in the spring with the careful hopefulness of people who have survived something they did not expect to survive, is now feeding the fire. The mathematics of survival demand it, and the mathematics are correct, and the mathematics offer nothing in the way of comfort to the people doing the surviving. The Battle of Valia Alba comes in late July 1476, and it comes at a moment when Stephen has already understood that the terms of this engagement are different from Vaslui. He does not have the fog, he does not have the perfect choke point. He does not have the vassal troops in positions where their breaking will serve his purpose rather than the enemy's. What he has is his army, hardened and experienced, and the knowledge that a fighting retreat is not the same thing as a rout. He engages, he loses. His forces fall back in order, bloodied but intact, and the distinction between military defeat and strategic collapse is real, even if it is cold comfort to the men who do not come back from the riverbank at Valia Alba. Stephen does not allow the defeat to become a dissolution. The army retreats. The burning continues ahead of the Ottoman advance. The land consumes itself so that the army cannot be consumed. Mehmed advances through a country that is destroying itself in front of him and finds, as Suleiman Pasha found in the winter of 1474, that the enemy he cannot defeat is not the army falling back through the trees. It is the land. It is the stripped wells and the burned grain and the driven-off livestock and the landscape of deliberate deprivation that Stephen has made of his own country, and which offers the greatest army of the age, nothing to eat, nothing to hold, and nowhere to govern. An empire can conquer territory. It cannot conquer absence. Mehmed is a brilliant commander, and brilliant commanders understand when the ground beneath them has changed. By late summer, the Ottoman army is withdrawing south, carrying its dead and its diseases, and the particular frustration of an empire that has demonstrated, beyond any reasonable doubt, that it can devastate Moldavia, and has demonstrated, with equal clarity, that it cannot hold it. Stephen watches the Ottoman army recede. This is not a moment of triumph. The documentary does not permit it to be. He is watching the departure of an army that has just burned what he spent 18 months rebuilding, that has killed men he cannot replace, that has driven his people into the forest for a second winter in 2 years. He has not been conquered. He is standing. And the question of what is standing with him is harder to answer than it has ever been. The victory letters are still out there, somewhere, in the archives of Rome and Buda and Krakow, filed under congratulations, filed under the athlete of Christ, filed under the impressive and the admirable and the ultimately unrescued. They asked for a crusade and received warm words. They asked for soldiers and received diplomatic formulations. They asked Europe to understand that what happened at Vaslui was not a Moldavian victory but a Christian one. And Europe understood, and Europe did nothing. And now it is the autumn of 1476, and Stephen stands in a country that has been deliberately destroyed twice in 2 years, once by his own hand, and once by the enemies. And the victory that felt like salvation in January 1475 feels, in this autumn light, like the beginning of a longer suffering whose end is not yet visible. He is 43 years old. He has been voivode of Moldavia for nearly 20 years. He has fought more battles than most commanders will see in a lifetime, and he has won most of them. And the winning has left his country standing, and his country scarred, and his people alive in the forests, and his grain stores ash on the autumn wind. This is what the letters were for. This is what the silence cost. The precise measure of his isolation is the distance between the army he asked for and the army that never came, measured in burned harvests and forest winters and the faces of the unnamed boyars people, who have survived everything their voivode's genius required of them, and who will be required to survive more. He surveys what remains. He is still standing. The thing that stands with him is Moldavia, diminished, devastated, and unbroken. Whether the thing preserved and the thing destroyed can still be called by the same name is a question that the autumn of 1476 does not answer. It is a question that will take years, and the particular kind of courage that comes not from certainty but from exhaustion to even begin to ask properly. Stephen the Great has saved his country. He is still in the process of learning what that means, and the learning is not finished, and the cost of the education is not yet fully paid. The fields are quiet now. That is the first thing, not peaceful. Quiet is not the same as peaceful, and anyone who has stood in a place where violence has recently passed understands the difference in their bones. Peaceful implies restoration, implies that the natural order has reasserted itself and the world has returned to what it was before. This is not that. This is the silence of absence, the silence of things that were here and are no longer here, of structures that held grain and warmth and the ordinary continuance of human life now reduced to their outlines. Ash and post hole and the dark stain in the earth where a floor once was. Stephen rides through it in the autumn of 1476, and the camera of history, if we allow ourselves the conceit, does not linger on his face. It moves instead across the landscape he passes through, and what it finds there is not dramatic. It is administrative. A burned field, a collapsed granary, its timbers fallen inward, the roof now indistinguishable from the floor. A village that appears on the maps the scribes keep in Suseva and does not appear on the earth. These are not the ruins of ancient civilizations, not the romantic desolation of something long ago and far away. The ash is recent. The char on the remaining timber is still black rather than gray. Some of the post holes still smell of the fires that made them. Stephen has done this twice now, ordered the destruction of his own country's capacity to sustain life in order to deny that capacity to an advancing army. And the second time is in some ways harder to look at than the first, because the first time the villages had already begun to rebuild before. Mehmed came and undid the rebuilding. The people of certain districts in the Vaslui region have now experienced this twice in 2 years. They have watched their stores burn twice. They have spent 2 winters in the forest. There are children who do not remember a granary standing, This is where the documentary must resist its own momentum. The story has a shape. The small kingdom, the enormous army, the brilliant trap, the stunning victory, the second invasion, the survival. And that shape has a gravitational pull toward meaning, toward the conclusion that suffering of this magnitude must have been in service of something that justifies. But the ash does not care about justification. The families who emerge now from the tree line, blinking into the autumn light, moving back toward the outlines of what were their homes. They are not symbols. They are not the supporting cast of a military masterclass. They are the people whose grain Stephen burned, and they are hungry, and the chronicles do not record their names. Stephen knows this. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about the man who rides through this landscape in the autumn of 1476. He is not indifferent to what he sees. Indifference would be, in a strange way, easier to comprehend. A commander who does not feel the cost of his decisions is at least a coherent figure, a technician of power, a pure strategist, a man who has excised sentiment from the calculus of survival. Stephen is not that man. The evidence of his long reign, the churches he builds, the monasteries he endows, the care with which he manages the Orthodox ecclesiastical life of his principality, suggests a man of genuine piety, genuine attachment to the people and the civilization he governs. He burns their grain and builds them churches. He orders the destruction of their livelihoods and then spends decades reconstructing the institutions that give those livelihoods meaning. The contradiction is not resolved by calling it hypocrisy. It is the contradiction of leadership in impossible circumstances, and it sits at the center of his legacy like a coal that does not cool. The work of reconstruction begins with the same methodical intelligence that built the trap at Vaslui. This is worth noting, because it is easy to imagine that the qualities that make a man brilliant in war are separate from the qualities that make a man effective in peace, and sometimes that is true. In Stephen's case, it is not. He surveys the damage with the same systematic attention he brought to the survey of the Bakhlad Valley's terrain. He assesses what can be salvaged, what must be rebuilt from nothing, where the population is most concentrated and most vulnerable, where the first resources must go. He moves through the devastated districts not as a conqueror surveying his prize, but as an administrator surveying a problem that requires solution before winter arrives and makes it worse. He has perhaps 6 weeks before the cold returns. He uses them. And yet, the reconstruction is possible because Moldavia survives as a political entity. And Moldavia survives as a political entity because Stephen made the decisions he made. This is the ledger the documentary has been building toward, and this chapter is where it must be read aloud without flinching from either column. In a world that has swallowed Byzantium whole, that has absorbed Bulgaria and Serbia and most of the Orthodox Christian civilization of the Balkans into the administrative machinery of the Ottoman Empire, Moldavia persists. Its voivode is not a vassal. Its church is not subordinated. Its language, its law, its particular way of organizing the relationship between the land and the people who work it. These continue. This is not a small thing. It is, in the context of the 15th century's relentless consolidation of imperial power, almost inexplicable, almost miraculous. The military historian who studies Vaslui studies it because it is a masterclass in terrain exploitation and deception, and the weaponization of logistics. The nationalist who claims it studies it because it is proof that the small can defeat the great through intelligence rather than mass. Both of them are right. Neither of them is telling the whole story. The whole story includes the unnamed boyar at the tree line. He is there in the autumn of 1476, and we should see him now, not as a symbol, not as a representative of the peasant class or the moral conscience of the documentary, but as a specific man in a specific place, watching the voivode ride through the ruins of decisions they both know were made correct, and cost too much. He confronted Stephen once in the firelight of 1474 over the order to burn the stores. His people, he said, or something like it. The chronicle that preserves a shadow of this confrontation does not give us his exact words. His people are not abstractions. They are families. They will starve. Stephen listened. Stephen burned the grain anyway. And now, 2 years later, the boyar is still here, which means he survived, which means in some sense the decision that appalled him also saved him. What does a man do with that? What does survival feel like when it arrives in the shape of the thing you argued against? He does not speak. The autumn is quiet around him, and he does not speak. And this is the documentary's most honest moment, the acknowledgement that some questions do not have answers that words can carry. The boyar's silence is not ignorance. It is the particular silence of a man who understands too much to reduce his understanding to language. He has watched the grain burn. He has watched the Ottoman army arrive and be destroyed. He has watched Mehmed himself come north with a force larger than the first and be defeated, not in battle, but by the stripped and silent land. He has watched his people survive in the forest through 2 winters that should have broken them. He has watched Stephen ride out of Suceava and back into it. And he knows that the man on the horse is not a hero in the simple sense, and not a villain in the simple sense, and that the categories available to him, the categories of his faith, his culture, his understanding of what a ruler owes people, and what a people owes their survival, do not quite fit the shape of what he has witnessed. The Orthodox Church will eventually canonize Stephen. This is a fact that arrives in the narration with the weight of centuries behind it, and it must be handled carefully because it is both entirely comprehensible and genuinely strange. The canonization comes long after his death. He reigns until 5004, nearly 30 more years after Vaslui, a reign of sustained survival in impossible circumstances that includes more wars, more campaigns, more of the brutal arithmetic of a small state maintaining itself against large ones. When he dies in 1504, he leaves behind a principality that is still standing, still orthodox, still governed by its own law. He leaves behind 44 churches and monasteries, most of them built to commemorate specific military victories, so that the sacred and the martial are literally constructed together in stone, inseparable, the prayer and the battle occupying the same architectural space. The Church looks at this life, the wars, the churches, the survival, the cost, and finds in it the shape of a saint's. It is not wrong to find that shape there. Stephen's devotion to the Orthodox faith is not a performance. His protection of the Church's institutions, his endowment of the monasteries, his understanding of Moldavian identity as inseparable from its religious life. These are genuine, and they are part of why Moldavia survives in the form that it does. A purely secular state, governed purely by the logic of power, might have made the same military decisions and not preserved the civilization those decisions were meant to protect. Stephen preserves both, and the Church is not wrong to recognize that. But sanctity, as the Church understands it, implies a quality of soul that transcends the conditions of its exercise. It implies that the man who made the decisions made them in a spirit that was oriented towards something beyond the merely strategic. And here the question becomes genuinely difficult, and the documentary does not pretend otherwise. What does sanctity look like when it is inseparable from the decision to burn your own people's grain? What does it look like when the man being canonized is the man who listened to the boyar's grief and then gave the order anyway, not because he was indifferent to the grief, but because he had calculated correctly that the alternative was worse? The Church's answer, implicit in the canonization, is that this is precisely what sanctity looks like in a fallen world. Not the absence of terrible choices, but the willingness to make them in full consciousness of their cost and to carry that cost without pretending it away. The saint is not the man who avoids the fire. The saint is the man who walks into it for reasons larger than himself and does not lie about what the fire does. This is a serious answer. It deserves to be taken seriously. And yet, the boyar at the tree line, he is still there. In the imagination, the documentary asks us to sustain, watching the autumn light move across the burnt fields and the collapsed granaries and the outlines of the village that is on the maps and not on the earth. If you told him that the man who ordered the burning would be canonized, that the church would find in Stephen's life the shape of a saint's, what would his face do? Not his words, his face, because the words might be manageable. A man of faith in the 15th century has a vocabulary for the sanctification of suffering, a theological framework in which the cost paid by the innocent can be understood as meaningful, even redemptive. He might find those words, he might even believe them, but his face, in the moment before the words arrive, in the moment when the information lands and the body responds before the mind has organized its response, what would his face do? This is the question the documentary cannot answer, and will not pretend to answer, and believes is more valuable unanswered than resolved, because the resolution would be false. The resolution would require us to choose between the civilizational truth. Moldavia survives, orthodoxy persists, the corridor does not become a road, and the intimate truth. The families in the forest, the grain in the ash, the children who do not remember a granary standing. And the documentary's argument, sustained across 8 chapters and the length of a war and the span of a life, is that these truths do not resolve. They coexist. They will always coexist. The victory and the cost are not sequential. First the cost, then the victory. They are simultaneous. They are the same event seen from different distances, and the distance you stand at determines which one you see more clearly. But standing closer to one does not make the other less real. Stephen the Great rides through the autumn of 1476, and the work of reconstruction begins, and it will continue for nearly 3 more decades. And at the end of it, Moldavia will still be standing. 5 centuries from now, the name Vaslui will be a word that carries enormous weight in Romanian national memory. A proof, a founding, a demonstration that the small and the intelligent can defeat the large and the powerful when the terrain is right and the preparation is thorough and the commander is willing to pay the price. Military academies will study the battle. Historians will write about Stephen's understanding of logistics as a weapon, his manipulation of the Ottoman army's assumptions, his use of fog and forest, and the particular geography of the Bolard Valley. Nationalists will invoke him in times of crisis, as nations always invoke their founding geniuses, as proof that the national character contains within it the capacity for this kind of brilliance. And somewhere in that memory, in the margins of the chronicles that celebrate the genius, the unnamed boyar persists, not as a name. History has not given him that, but as a presence, as the thing the victory required and the canonization must account for, as the face in the tree line that watches the fire take the stores and does not look away, and does not speak, and carries in its silence the full weight of what it means to be saved by a man who burns what you need to live in order to ensure that you will live. Whether that face would recognize the saint in the man who gave the order, whether recognition, if it came, would feel anything like peace, is a question that the autumn of 1476 does not answer, and that the 5 centuries since have not answered, and that this documentary, in its final breath of, fers not as a failure of understanding, but as the most honest thing it knows how to say. Some questions are not problems to be solved. They are the shape of the truth, held open, asking only to be looked at steadily and without flinching. This is one of them. The fire is out. The fields are quiet. Stephen rides on,